vous propose de continuer cette journée avec la première table ronde, transition énergétique, tous volontaires, et vous avez remarqué, point d'interrogation. Point d'interrogation. Pour ouvrir cette première table ronde, on va demander à Morten BÆK, qui est directeur général de l'énergie et du climat au Ministère de l'énergie et du climat du Danemark, de nous faire un petit keynote speak. Please, Mr. Morten BÆK, could you please join me? On aime beaucoup regarder le Danemark en France, 1/10 de la population française, 1/10 de la surface, 1/10 de la consommation d'énergie. Un pays qui a démarré très très tôt la transition énergétique, un pays qui a su valoriser toutes les filières énergies renouvelables, qu'elles soient chaleur ou électricité, avec beaucoup de géothermie. Au Danemark aussi, beaucoup de solaire thermique, et puis bien sûr beaucoup d'éolien avec Vestas, industriel numéro 1 mondial, enfin en tout cas sur le podium, ça change un petit peu chaque année, sur le podium avec Goldwind et juste derrière Siemens Gamesa. Morten BÆK, what is the present situation in Denmark concerning energy transition and the development of renewable energy, with a special focus on industrial reality and social reality? Thank you very much. Morten BÆK, Directeur Général de l'énergie et du climat du Danemark.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity, Excellencies, dear friends. I don't have to tell you that science is clear. It's been said already this morning, and I don't have to tell you that we are entering a transformation. But I want to take you back maybe 50 years. In 1970, and many of you will be familiar with Sesame Street and Kermit the Frog. Those 50 years ago, Kermit said, he had a song on a tree stub during, "It's not easy being green." Well, it wouldn't be at that time because, as Fatby Oil showed us, oil, gas, coal was the primary sources of energy. I wouldn't think that would be as easy today for Kermit to sing his song, and hopefully that's the picture that you have as well. But it's still not the easiest thing being green. And why is that? Because the price of renewable energy is the lowest in almost all major energy markets across the world. Populations are changing their minds on renewable energy and climate change. We're seeing the effects of climate change this winter in France, in Denmark, this winter in Australia, in California. People are waking up to climate reality. So why is it still not easy being green? Well, I'll try to venture into that and give you a picture, at least from the Danish perspective, of why it may not still be as easy as it should be being green. First of all, Larry Fink, the CEO of the largest bank in the world, or largest financial institution, BlackRock, on January 1st sent out his yearly email to colleagues in the investment circle. This year, not focusing on all of the opportunities out there, but basically a wake-up call again, saying, guys, we are too heavily exposed to carbon. Our financial portfolios are too heavily invested in carbon, hydrocarbons. We need to change our portfolios. That was a good thing to wake up for me too on the 1st of January. The financial markets are getting this. I know that our institutional investors in Denmark for years have been entering my office saying, we want to invest in renewable energy. Why? Because the interest rates in the markets are below 0, but in renewable energy they are at 6 to 8%. It's a no-brainer to enter these markets. But now Wall Street is waking up to this reality as well. So that's a good thing. But governments are not there yet. What used to be 5, 10, 20 years ago a situation where governments were nurturing the renewable child is still the mindset of governments. I would venture to say even my own. And we are a front runner, as you will see in the numbers in the renewables markets. We need to change our mindset because this change is coming. The financial markets are there, industry is there, the populations, at least in the West, are there and it's moving. We need to change our mindset from nurturing the child to not standing in the way of the steam train that's rolling ahead, fueled by renewable energy. And so I think that is the critical point. How do governments change their mindsets? How do we make sure that we don't stay exposed to carbon? In our budget, the Danish budget, 5-7% of our revenues every year come in from renewables, or from hydrocarbon taxes. How do we make sure that 10 years from now, we don't have that vulnerability in our state budget? That's the challenge that we are facing. So I think there's tremendous work to do. I think France and Denmark are leading the way even on this. I think the European Union is doing a lot, but we can do much more. And what can we do primarily, apart from changing our tax structures? Well, for one thing, we can stay ahead of the curve. So instead of looking at how we nurture the child, how we subsidize renewables, we need to look at how we can integrate renewables into our systems. How can we make sure that regulatory frameworks are set up to incentivize market integration? How can we continue to build out our European electricity infrastructure? How can we set in place regulation to incentivize electrification of our system? How can we ensure that storage get online? Because that's really, really critical with fluctuating renewable sources. How can we make sure that, and Fatih alluded to this, the hydrogen economy comes online, P2X in general, using electricity for other energy sources is established in the marketplace. How can we make all this happen? And that's a big thing. It's a big institutional change. It's a tremendous job for regulators to look into and find the right solutions in this extremely complex setup. But we also need to set bold targets, and we need to continue doing that. Because targets is what drives the transformation. We need to align at the European level on serious 2030 targets for carbon emission reductions, for renewables build-out. The 40% target that we have in place right now on carbon is not really anything near ambitious. Because already with measures in place, we are well beyond 40%. So France, Denmark, in conjunction with other countries, have pledged that we want to increase that target to at least 55% of carbon reductions by 2030. And we hope that the rest of the EU will follow suit in the coming months. We need to take this to the global level, and if we are to do that, we need to look at this not only from a business perspective, but also from a socially just transition perspective. So how can we make sure that the lowest parts of the population don't lose out in this transformation? How can we make sure that our economies are not hampered by the change? And I would say for us, that's fairly easy because our economy is quite green already. Our investments are going in the right place. Our industry is tuned to the transition that's happening. We are earning more money from renewable energy and green exports than from anything else in our economy. So for Denmark, it's not a problem. For Europe, maybe a little bit, but we are on the right side of the curve still. What we've done in Denmark to get to that place is basically two things. One thing is making sure that fossil fuels are not subsidized. The other thing is making sure that we de-risk renewable investments. And I want to focus in maybe a little bit in the last 2 minutes I have on offshore wind, which Fatih so kindly alluded to. We didn't pay him to do that. But it's true that Denmark was the nurturing point of offshore wind. How did that come online? Well, onshore wind for many years has been a good business. Offshore wind wasn't. Putting a wind turbine offshore didn't really make logic sense. But maybe it did anyways, because the wind conditions are more stable, so the fluctuating part is not a problem for the system. The conditions offshore have been handled by technology development. And today we're looking at an industry that's really, really taking shape. And it's doing so because the government has set in place the right regulatory framework, that the way we do tendering is in dialogue with the competitors in a clear and transparent market, that we de-risk the investment by looking at the seabed ahead of the tendering round, making sure that we know what's there and what you're building on, what grounds you're building on, by making sure that the cables are in place for the wind turbines to deliver to the market once they're in place, that we establish a window that's broad enough for the construction of the park to make sure that you can get the entire supply chain in place at the lowest cost, and so forth. There's a lot of components to this, but what's most critical is the dialogue that we have with the market actors, and that we listen to the needs that are in place among the actors to ensure that we de-risk the process. And I know that France is going the same way. I know that you're doing all the right things, establishing a one-stop shop for regulatory certainty, ensuring that you have a dialogue with investors and so forth. But I think it's not difficult. It's just difficult if we don't see the transformation that's happening and we don't avoid the disruptions that are coming, no matter if we like it or not. Carbons are exiting the market, renewables are entering. I want to leave you with this. In Game of Thrones, there was one saying, "Winter is coming," and that was a bad thing. I would hope that winter was coming, and I would hope that winter was coming really, really hard this year and in years to come, so that we'd get snow in Denmark and almost frost in Paris. That's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen. Climate scientists will tell you it's not going to happen for the next 100 years. But we can do a lot of good staying ahead of the curve, looking at the opportunities for our societies, and in that way curbing climate change to the levels that we need to see. 1.5 degrees, Glasgow will be important. Denmark is pushing ahead, France is pushing ahead, the EU is doing almost all we can, but we need the rest of the world to see the challenges and to see the opportunities in the green transformation. Thank you for allowing me this space.